Welcome to IMAGI-NATION TV. I'm Cassidy Roberts. I'm a proud Wiradjuri woman, and I am currently living on Darug land in the Blue Mountains. I'll quickly throw over to my co-host to introduce herself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Cassidy. I'm Maddi. I'm a Gallagher woman currently residing on Wiradjuri land. And before we get started, we both like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and future from all the lands that we're joining on today.
Thanks, Maddi. So today we're exploring what is co-design. So I'll quickly throw around just to introduce everyone on our panel today. So I'll start with Angus.
Yama, my name's Angus. I'm a Gallagher man. I'm down here on Wurundjeri country, but I'm pumped because there's so many people from back home around here. I grew up on Anawan country, and there's a couple of folks around from Gumbaynggirr, so this will be good.
Thank you, Angus. And we've also got Georgia Smith.
Hi everyone, I'm logging in from Motherwell country down near Geelong in Victoria. I've been a part of AIME as a mentor since 2017, and I'm currently AIME president for Deakin University at the Geelong campuses, and it's good to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Georgia. We've also got another Georgia.
Hey everyone, I'm Georgia, as Cassidy said. I'm the local president at AIME Coffs Harbour, and I've been a part of AIME for a very long time, about 9 years. I started off as a mentee, and now I'm a president. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Georgia. We've also got Lockie.
G'day, Bob. My name's Lachlan Skinner. I'm the founder of One Mob Radio, located here in Gumbaynggirr country, in Coffs Harbour, and I was a AIME mentee many years ago.
Awesome, thanks, Lockie. And we also have Ryu. Am I pronouncing that right? I hope so.
Riley.
Sorry, Riley.
Yeah, I'm Riley, and I like to sing, I like to rap music, but I live on the island, Magnetic Island.
Awesome. Well, today, guys, we are exploring what is co-design. So AIME employs co-design to challenge the imbalance of power held by the few, to create unlikely connections and drive the capacity for boundless curiosity. We know this helps everyone to come together and to share knowledge and power. On IMAGI-NATION TV this week, we are challenging our panelists and audience to co-design a solution to one of the largest human-made problems, education inequity.
Yeah, so let's jump right into it. Guys, I'll throw a question to one person and we'll go from there. So we'll start with Georgia Smith. I have a question for you. What does the ideal classroom or school look like to you? What kind of space would you go, yes, of course I want to go to school today, rather than, oh gosh, I've got to go to school today? What's the ideal classroom look like to you?
That's a really good question. I think trying to think back to when we were in classrooms and in high school as well. It's probably one that caters to everyone's needs, and deals with the different learning styles, I guess, and not maybe just a fixed approach of sitting inside a classroom, sitting on chairs at a desk, looking at a whiteboard, listening to a teacher talk. And not that that's bad, but I think one teacher with 20 up to 30 kids, and if someone needs a bit more attention, a group needs more attention than others, that's difficult in that situation. So the ideal classroom, I think, something that will cater to everyone's needs and in the circumstances that they're facing, whatever that may be, whether it's in their control or not.
Yeah, for sure. At the moment, we've got this kind of one size fits all, and lots of kids aren't getting the right education for them. They're not getting their cultural needs met, their educational needs met because their voices aren't being heard. I'm going to throw to Lockie, and I'll pitch the same question. I'll pitch a similar question. How do we transition from the education that we have today into one that betters our students for the future, that actually has those needs met?
Well, it'd be first listening to our young people. I believe, like, I agree that we definitely need to look at the way that, school currently sits and how, I guess, our young people, not everybody wants to do maths or English. It's about getting creative and really exercising people's minds in terms of creativeness. And so, yeah, I think the first thing would be to listen to the kids. And I know that's not everybody's preferred thing, but, I think it's the first step to really starting to see some, good stuff. You look at mental health and you look at, I guess, connection to culture and everything else. And none of these things are actually going to be really nurtured unless we're listening to those people that really want to exercise that. And, maths and English doesn't always do that for kids.
Absolutely agree with you there, Lockie. I definitely think it needs to be a more, holistic approach, rather than a generalized approach to learning. And I advocate for that. So I'm going to throw this question to Angus. I want to know, how do you think schools can be made fairer and more inclusive from within the schools?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Lockie's sort of like hit the nail on the head there, in that I think the first steps towards inclusivity or those kinds of things is advocacy and agency for kids who get to say, this is what I need, can you provide that space? Yeah, I don't know that I can go further than that. It's just like, it seems like a really simple equation to me. Someone has something that they need, you ask them what they need, and then you provide it, instead of trying to provide blanket solutions and national solutions and stuff for however many million kids there are in Australia.
Absolutely. And I will throw this next question to Georgia Elliot, or Gigi, as we're referring to her today. I want, in your opinion, who takes ownership and responsibility of making the education system and, schools and education in the classroom as a whole, who takes the responsibility of making that inclusive and fair, and who gets the kids to get the most out of their education, if that makes sense,
Yeah, that's a really tough question, because it definitely takes more than one person to help teach a child. Like, you can't just shove them in one area and expect them to know everything from this one person. They've got to have different learning experiences from different people and everything. So really, and also kids might not be suited to just one type of learning. Like, there might be some who have difficulties in the classrooms and need to go somewhere else, or they're more like adjusted to being with their parents, or they've got a different way of learning, which is totally cool. So I think realistically it falls on kind of all of us to help teach a child. Like, we can't just blame or like put everything on one person, because like we all teach different kids different things. So yeah, depending on our different learning styles and like how we were taught ourselves, and like plus other factors such as culture and stuff like that, will depend on how differently a child is raised and taught. So yeah, I definitely think it's on all of us.
Yeah, for sure. We were very lucky to have the opportunity to jump on these discussions earlier, and some really awesome discussion came from these questions. Now, something that we brought up earlier was this idea that, you know, in our education system at the moment, it's very boxed in, very square cut, very not catering to anyone other than a person from 50 years ago, you know, not being able to go to the bathroom when you need to, not being able to use soap at school, not being able to get up and walk around or be noisy in the classroom or whatever it is. It doesn't cater to neurodivergency. It doesn't cater to people with differing abilities. It doesn't cater to Indigenous people. It doesn't cater to LGBTQIA+. And so at the moment, we have this education system that is really not catering to most people, even though it's this blanket education. So we were discussing how, you know, the way the environment needs to change and what voices not just need to be heard, but actively play a role in changing the education every single step of the way. If you want to change education for Indigenous people, you have to have Indigenous voices not just there in the background. They have to be part of the decision making, part of the policy making, part of the education from step one all the way through to the finish. So following on from this discussion, I'll just open it to the panel. What do you think needs to happen for us to engage people like policymakers to actively get the voices of Indigenous people lifted so that our education system is better for our next generation of kids?
I would probably say, I think in system, I feel like, you know, it's often talked about like, oh, like who do we need to engage, or like how do we get them involved? And I feel like, you know, often we're doing all their work for them, and I just feel like sometimes these people that are making these big decisions should be coming to grassroots, or getting people to come to grassroots to really have conversation about how we're you know, what people want and how it should work. You know, you've seen society like it's not black or white anymore. There's so many different shades in terms of many different areas. Like there's just so much to it. So to keep school the way it has been for many years it's just not, it's not right. Like we need to start looking at the different, there's a lot of different things that need to be looked at in terms of that. And I don't think it should necessarily be us chasing those policymakers all the time. It should be them coming to us.
Yeah, that's amazing. You go, Georgia.
Sorry. You go, Angus. Sorry, go.
I was gonna say, let's beat that. Let's just change the policymakers. The average age, I just did a Google, the average age of a parliamentarian in Australia was 51 in 2013. Let's get that down into the 30s. Let's get a couple of 20-year-olds in parliament and see what happens. They can't, it's a jaded view, but they can't do any worse, right?
Something Lachlan said just now, in the policies that are put in place to, although they aim to assist, say, Indigenous Australians. I recently did an assignment on the Closing the Gap report and the policy, and most of the targets, the seven targets, are based around education. And I think while Year 12 attainment and early childhood education are on track, everything else isn't. So 2 out of 7 targets, what's improving? So I think putting those kinds of targets as measures for success, that's from the get-go, not putting anything in place to give them the means to say, hey, you will improve along these lines, by putting what's a more Western approach to it and expecting Indigenous Australians to assimilate again, despite its good intentions. It's like it's flawed from the beginning. And I think, similar as Lachlan said, you need to cater to those different shades, I guess. And I'm sure you know, if it was for any Western background Australian, non-Indigenous Australian, sorry, that they wouldn't be happy about it either. But I think because the majority are happy about it and it's a minority that's being affected, they're being considered the problem then, and it's shifting the blame, I think.
I better clear up the shades thing real quick. I don't mean black or white, as in it's just all the different areas and all the different, I guess, needs of a person is where those shades come from.
Yeah, sorry, I did get what you meant there.
Oh, you freaked me out. I was like, oh,
No,
what did I say?
nothing to do with color, not of skin, of different groups of people and their backgrounds.
Yeah, and Angus touched on something which I, haven't really thought about, but it's the younger people in Parliament, because, the younger people know what's going on in our generations and what's happening now. They don't have the perspective of people who have lived through other things. And, obviously those older people have gone through other, obviously people who are around the 80s, obviously saw the Thatcherism in England and stuff like that. But we know, for lack of a better phrase, we know now. We know today. So I think it's important to get people, in their 20s, even 30s, to get into those, government positions where they can make a difference and put these ideas forward that we have, and my best friend's cousin is in Parliament trying to do that right now, and she's 23, I think. So, and it's great to see that and see the passion that she has for making that change for us, because she knows us and that people her age know us and know what we want. So I definitely love that point that you made there, Angus. And, Georgia had some really amazing valid points as well on, it's not about playing the blame game, because the blame game never works. You've got to work together, and as much as someone or a group of people might be at fault, need to work together to fix it and work together to build up from there. That's my point. Yeah, ask why, and not just assume that these gaps are because of people being Indigenous. Well, yes, it's because they're Indigenous, but why? What's the underlying issues that we need to address?
Yeah, I totally agree. And, the first step to, I guess, getting young people or Aboriginal people into Parliament is, I guess, us also playing a part of stepping up. And what I often find is a lot of young people, we really need young voices. And I really encourage anyone that might be watching to really, really step up in that space. I know that AIME is a really good program in terms of building up young leaders and giving young people a voice. And I to anybody that runs a service or a youth service, like, it's about providing young people with that opportunity to have a voice and to practice that before, getting into these positions, and then, just building capacity a little bit in terms of like confidence and all that sort of stuff, because more often than not, and I know we're not allowed to say it here at AIM, but that shame factor thing takes over a lot of the time. But yeah, we just need to rise above that. And when you see youth leadership and you see, these youth advisory committees, jump on them and like just start having your voice and really practicing that. So yeah, really, really work towards that, because that's where we see change.
Yeah, for sure. Isn't it interesting that when we get into these discussions, we realize how much is wrong with the education system in its current state and how much there is to fix, to the point where you think, oh goodness, you might as well just scrap it. You might as well start again. But the longer we leave it, the longer we wait to start again, the harder it's going to be. Why not start again now? We've got a question in from the YouTube chat that I'm going to pitch to the panelists. It's come from Becky, I believe. Many teachers are doing their best under a stale curriculum. How or what can we do to support teachers in making the curriculum more flexible to each child's learning needs? And this comes back to the how much there is to change in the education system. So it's not just a policy, it's not just classrooms or environment, it's also who's offering the education. What can we do for teachers so that they're benefiting the next generation as well? I'll leave that for discussion.
I know when I was in school, to be Aboriginal education just isn't learning the history of Aboriginal Australia and everything that happened. We learn a lot about it, but it was all from like the colonization perspective rather than like all the factors that occurred from like Aboriginal side. We didn't really get to learn too much about that, and I like am Aboriginal and I have lots of books on it, so I knew a lot from that perspective, but a lot of other people didn't, and I know a lot of my friends don't know that Aboriginal side. Like they know it, but not to the extent of what actually happened, like such as introduction of diseases and stuff like that. So possibly if we get more of that towards teachers and like get it outside of just Aboriginal studies, which half the time unfortunately doesn't run because well, I know at my old school it didn't run because not a lot of people wanted to do it because they thought they knew it all, which was vaguely annoying, but it's each to their own. So maybe just a little more teaching, like for the teachers in regards to that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. I know that in a lot of businesses, they offer cultural capability training yearly. It's something that everyone attends. But Indigenous culture is our history, it's our nation. Why are we having only Indigenous culture taught on NAIDOC week or only, 1 day a year? We're not Indigenous 1 day a year. We can't just remove our history and put it in a pocket for 1 day. That's not what happens. We're Aboriginal year round. We're Torres Strait Islander year round. We are mob year round. So in our education system, that's what it should be year round. Why is our second language another country? Why isn't it mob language or Auslan? Why are our teachers not getting new lessons and new education? They're teaching stale curriculum from 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Our teachers deserve the opportunity and in fact should be constantly updating their skills and educating our next generation.
I absolutely agree with you there, Maddi. Like, being in history and not learning about your own country's people's history, like, that's crazy to me. Like, we're learning about, and not that the other stuff that happened wasn't important, in England and, everything like that. But why are we not learning about where we come from first? Why is that not the priority? That's my why. That's my I would like to know. And, but I think definitely incorporating that history into even other lessons. I've had teachers who have incorporated Indigenous culture into English lessons, into maths lessons, into food tech, hospitality. There's so much we can learn by just throwing it into a lesson and saying, well, for example, and then teaching kids about that, you get the best of both worlds, and I think it is definitely about education of teachers, and doing it, like Maddi said, year round, and yeah, like I'm quite lucky. My deputy principal and my principal at my school, they go out of their way to learn and educate themselves so that they can bring that into our school, which is incredible to me that they do that in their own time and bring that in for us so that we can learn more. But I know it's not the same everywhere, and that's the hardest part.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry, just to duck in. It's really surprising because I learned more than I knew about Aboriginal history in my art class than I did in my history class. And that's because my year 12 the project was a timeline of Aboriginal Australia. So I was required to learn all about that. But also my teacher, who wasn't an Aboriginal man, he just really liked this, like all these Aboriginal artists. So he took it upon himself to learn all about their history, their knowledge, why they were inspired, what they were inspired by. So he ended up learning a lot about history on the way. So he'd show us all this stuff, like even stuff that you wouldn't expect, like what food source do people have out in the middle of the desert? They eat yams. So you're talking about yams, and then you find out there were military nuclear tests out in the middle of Western Australia, and then that caused a reduction of yams and also the killing of almost 5 mobs. And it still extends to this day. Like, it's just crazy the amount of stuff that isn't that well known that's actually had a huge effect on Australian Aboriginals. It's amazingly crazy.
And these are the kinds of things I know in New Zealand, Indigenous knowledges are taught as part of science degrees and those kinds of things. Like, they are incorporated into curriculum. So it's entirely possible. It's being proven elsewhere. It's just time for us to step up and say, this is what we need. This is what we want. Let's go. Give it.
I completely agree. And in regards to the question as well, in what can teachers do, it may not even be that it's their intention to not teach it. They just don't have the means, or it's not within their scope. It's intentionally not within their scope because of a government stakeholder matter, or because it's only within their discretion. And it could be that they want to, but when they do, it's going to be like scraping the surface, that it's going to be pointless. And if I think that it's not going to be any, and not that I wouldn't want it to be, but you could think what impression it makes on the students. It's not going to leave much to make them interested, to question more and more, like what Georgia things, all those kinds of things that she's just outlined, to go, wow, that's really interesting. Why have we not learned that? And that's just a reflection of an attitude that's lasted hundreds of years, and something that only Indigenous, I think, are moving and mobilizing like so hard. I think it's for non-Indigenous to be able to reflect and sort of concede that, I think it's time that it's on our part that something needs to change.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that discussion, guys. We're gonna wrap it up shortly, but before we do, I'm gonna leave the panelists and the chat with this question. What's one thing each person can do to help step up and improve the current system? You don't have to respond now, but just think on it. You can chuck in the chat later and have a discussion in your household, have a discussion with friends, because one of the first steps is always awareness and discussion. And think about what you've learned from the discussion today. If you have any final thoughts, leave us with it. We're about to hear a performance from Riley, which would be awesome, followed by a performance from Cassidy. So I'm going to hand it over to these two young artists, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Riley, I think you're on mute, mate. You just have to take it off mute.
So I check the mic. I give it an extra swipe with a Lysol disinfectant wipe. seconds on deck. I got every time I throw my tongues and I give some moves that I act like a jock strap, cut my shake my hand, make sure it's all there. We call the Paul Bear. Caesar should be murdered by and why stop? Overkill like a pipe bomb in a pine box. The audience fine. When we're putting the time clock to getting mine, they treating it like a cyclops. Like it's the only one I got. And my thoughts like Night's Scott. Every line's obscene, perverted is mine. Got the dirtiest rhyme stop. This what's perennial advising. Every time I drop. So throw the theme, the outfit out, channel in like the Panama Canal. But I get off and arms about you saying trash is all that I put out. Man, I still get the bag when I'm putting garbage out. Plus the party now, I'm not about to wash it out the filthiest. So all this talking about, I'm washed up how preposterous because of cleanliness and steps the godliness is obvious. But it's impossible for me to be beside myself. And I'm back that cap roof like a popping out. Still on top of pal. Got me sitting on the numbers like a pocket out. Quit call you out and you do make me give my clock it down. Cause if I do it, see you later, alligator, made it after trailer, then I made a validated 2 no 1 to hate the fake about the same. I'm after send my bank account, some is some more people you're to complain about. I say the boss, I never slap, I always get a shot. I think the guns for me starting feel like that, like a march. Cause when I rap, it's like falling on my back in the target. Cause I just target on my back. But if I ever double cross my fans and lost my stance, I probably pop 5 Zans, go to my garage, stop my van, and hell, it's much carbon monoxide and exhaust I can, and doze off like odds like that. With these thoughts I have, such a giant and it's washed by ants. If this is the test of time, I pass with flying colors, like I just tossed my crayons. Small, medium, and large size cans, sanitizers, of all type brands, cost 9 bands, which is a small price for life, so wipes in if I palms, but you cross my pants, I'll wash my hands, man. So go. Yeah, I sit in silence and candle lit environment, sipping down Irish for getting violent, homicidal visions when I'm spitting life. Just really, I'm just fulfilling my wish of killing rhymes, which is really childish and silly, but I'm really like this. I'm giving nightmares to Billie Eilish. I'm getting side. So the EMDs, CCPMDs. Giving y'all the business to your AIME, Annabelle Peter, and TB&B. Man, it's 2020. Still ain't seeing me. Just call me Santa Claus. Cause at the prison, I have to grab them all. I'm at the mall, in the bathroom stall. She sucked the basketball. No plastic straw. No fractured jaw. Toe check. She wanna off. I'm so far past the ball. I should practice ball. Mentally, I'm generally, do as I have a car. You think you have a dogs. This is murder. And you can merge. Smooth back to you. She can take my phone. She said, chirp. I said, hut. I can still. Then go with some worms, like the early bird. With this love, that's a dirty word. Then we fall in it. It's not a girl on Earth or any other planet. Designer, because I don't pay the back with so many knots. I need a chiropractor, and this is the final chapter. Because I need them fine after. Well, they gonna give me their needle like a vinyl scratcher. Yeah, I'm a card. Like Hallmark and Walmart, but a small club like Walmart. And don't take big dogs on. No bite like a tree coach, just all bark. The dog picking the wrong tree. They call me dog beat because I'm ball king. And I got a lot, yeah, like where cars park. I describe it as ball hard. It's this frame, but it's split like the 5 of the 10. Just without a second to spare, I'm striking again. And with the beaties on my alley, I go right to the pins. The side begins. I'm talking snap like heroin. The mic's so range, just like a binge. Like it in, I would write in a 10. My mind is a recycling bin. The stone's place I never been, but I never budget. I never been. Hyperextend on me. This game's life, it depends. Like a no diapers for men. Even when I'm about to less sell it, it's sour grapes. I still wine. I'm the best seller. Like a trade to spring. You was deep shots when it trade through drinks. You straight to your grapefruit. No escape route. She will leave here just skating with a few scrape wounds. Grass tonight, I'm not gonna graze you, but if all the same match, I'll be the Mad Hatter, because I am from many caps, you don't have any stats, so you be a fitter, so act like you're fitting a snap. Like a Phillies hat, no stopping me, you want no window, shopping spree. Probably the fuck of the Dollar Tree, you never buy, or you never constantly, you're always punking out. Like Halloween, you rather actively, you stop it, punk homie, and not a G. You got the pump, you're gonna cock the heat, or get the block and dump. If you shut a tree, you wouldn't pop the trunk. And I'm buddies with Apple, we are back to just some Balvin, Gunnerman, Scouting. Yeah, this is back to be the bloodiest outcome. Cause we gonna make you bleed with every cut from this album. So I'm chopping them up like diamonds in the dough, and some bigger the job of the I'm cut, and I'm next to the blood and sticking for that top of them, causing up with the boss. My shot, I'm talking about I'm gonna with the phenomenal with y'all. Like I'm dominoes, you know, dominoes. I keep dropping like dominoes or 4 minute abdominals. Don't move on my top even off the top of the door. Some get the cop to with something go cop them black and dope. It's just so relaxing, swallow. You got a pocket like a wanted stone. Wait, I'm the beat cut off.
That was sick. I think we can all agree that was sick. You're very, very talented. So this is an original song that I wrote. Quite the opposite style, but you know, this squad should have known better. Until I twice break my heart 1,000,000 times. Doesn't feel right, but I keep coming back again. Should've known I was gonna break, and now I'm broken. Harder and harder hit the ground. Should've known better, should've run away, but my heart just let you beg me to stay. Should've known better, should've run away, but my heart told me to stay. Should've known better, should've run away, but my heart just let you beg me to stay. Should've known better, should've run away, but my heart told me to stay. Heart told me to stay. Fool me once, fool me twice. Shame on me for being too nice. Doesn't feel right, but I'll forgive you once more. Should've known I was gonna break, and now I'm falling deeper and deeper. Got my heart still calling. Should've known better, should've run away, but my heart just let you beg me to stay. Should've known better, should've run away, but my heart told me to stay. Should've known better, should've run away, but my heart just let you beg me to stay. Should've known better, should've run away, but my heart told me to stay. Should've known I was gonna break. 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 Should've known better, should've run away, but my heart just let you beg me to stay. Should've known better, should've run away, but my heart told me to stay. Should've known better, should've run away, but my heart told me to stay. Heart told me to stay. Heart told me to stay. But my heart told me to stay.
Everyone, take yourselves off mute. Let's give both our artists rounds of applause. That'd be great. They did such a good job.
Good work to both of you.
Riley, that rap was incredible. I know that half of us were trying to hold our breath to test,
Breathe
but
for ya.
yeah. Go take a breath, man. That was amazing. And Cassidy, thank you so much for jumping on with your guitar. You two have so much talent. It's been amazing having you on the panelist today and co-hosting with you, Cassidy. Thank you so much, everyone, for jumping on. I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoons.
Thank you, Maddi. It's been a pleasure co-hosting with you as well. Thank you all for jumping on to IMAGI-NATION TV for this week. Hope to see you all again soon. Thank you to all the panelists. Love you all. Sending love, happiness, and positivity to everyone. Stay safe. Look after yourselves.
Big, deep breath in, everyone. Holy moly. That was amazing. Amazing. I want you all to go check out the